Okay, so we are now recording. And if anybody is not able to watch the full video tonight for some reason, this video will be available on our website following the presentation. It takes us about a week to upload the video and get it onto our website, but you can check that. Okay, so we're going to take just another couple of minutes for our presenter, Noelle Jennings, to work through her technical difficulties, and we will be back in just a minute. So everybody, please sit tight for just a couple more minutes, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, it looks like Noelle has been able to join us. So thanks, Noelle, and sorry for the last minute panic with the technical difficulties. It tends to happen with these Zoom meetings, but we're all here. So just to reiterate, this is Noelle Jinings with the Flathead County Weed Department, and she's going to be our guest speaker tonight. She is an expert on noxious weeds with us locally. So Noelle, I will let you take it away from here.
Hi, everybody. Sorry about that. You know, best laid plans and all of that. Like she said, I'm Noelle Jennings. I am the Flathead County Weed Control District's Education and Compliance Officer. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the Flathead County Weed Control District, but they have me to deal with the noxious weed compliance stuff, which I'll talk about later. And then we have all of the guys that go around and treat the right-of-ways, and we have contracts with BPA and Department of Transportation and Fish, Wildlife, and Parks and so forth, and we treat some of their sites as well. So I guess we'll just get right into it. So let me figure this out a little bit here. And I'll share my screen real quick with you guys so that we can, yeah, and here we go again. If I can get to all of my tabs, there we go, maybe. And okay, that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry, guys. I'm trying. All right. Can you guys, Haley, can you see the Flathead County? Yeah? Okay. So noxious weed, in case you guys aren't fully familiar, a noxious weed is like a classified weed. So anything that you see that you don't really like, you can consider a weed. But in order to be a noxious weed, it has to fall into a specific category. So it has to impact the economy, the environment in such a manner that the states determine that it needs to be controlled, and they take jurisdiction over that. And they say, if you have this weed, you really need to get rid of it so that it doesn't cause further damage. So a noxious weed is its own classification, and so that's what our department deals with, is just noxious weeds. So not dandelions, you know, not stuff like that, just listed noxious weeds. So the state of Montana allows for, they have their own group of noxious weeds, and then they allow each county within our state to make their own subset of weeds. Why they do that is because across the state of Montana, there's so many different climates. And so things that are noxious weeds and impact like the rangelands and stuff over on the east side may not even grow over here on the west side. So they allow the counties to make their own specific subset that impact that county and that county's livelihoods somehow. So you'll see on the screen, there's the state of Montana noxious weed list and then Flathead County noxious weed list. So for the state of Montana, I think there's around 37. And they're broken down into priorities, and that's just a way of classifying how aggressive we are in the management. So we have the state list, and then we have the Flathead County list. So when you access a lot of the ID resources that we'll talk about later as well, you'll see that there's a lot of literature about the state list and not as many resources on our specific list, unfortunately. We're trying to work on that. So I'll stop sharing that real quick. And so to give you guys an idea, so the state law is listed in the Montana Code Annotated, the MCA. And what it states is that anybody that has noxious weeds on their property, by law, has to try to get rid of them. And the law states that you're not allowed to knowingly allow these plants to grow or propagate on your property. And what that means is if you know you have them, you can't allow them to go to seed and like become your neighbor's problem, basically. We'll talk about the ID resources so you guys can get a better idea of what some of our ID stuff is. I'm not very good at this, Haley. There we go. Go away. I can't get to my, or maybe that'll work. No, that's not working. Yes. Okay, so there's a few different options for trying to find resources to ID. If you guys can see this, hopefully, this is one that Haley just shared with me. I didn't even know this thing existed randomly. But she will share these links with you so that you guys have these links as well. But this is put out by the Montana State University Extension Agency. It just kind of gives pictures and like a little bit of information. It doesn't get into the control, but I have other resources that'll help you out with that. But you can see, you can toggle through the top color on these pages correlates with the color of the plant. So you can kind of toggle through and be like, nope, it's not a purple plant. Maybe it's a yellow plant. So you keep going, and my internet connection isn't awesome, so I apologize. But you can see that there's a lot of different plants. Blue weed is the only blue one we have, but there's a ton of yellow ones. So you can kind of toggle through until you find the color of the flower and then kind of go from there. Another resource that we have, and it keeps doing that on me, is and we have some other documents in-house. So you can come into our office and get like paper versions of this kind of stuff. But this is one I wanted to show you. So this is Montana State University has a plant ID lab called the Shutter Lab. And this page kind of takes you through how to submit your own sample. You can also bring samples into our office and we can go through this process for you. Or there's actually an app that you can get on your phone. And if you want to contact me, I can tell you how to find it. It's super hard to find. You can't just go onto the app store and put in plant ID and really find it. It's kind of obscure. But so with this, if you wanted to, you can actually take a sample of the plant, and it kind of, you can see it kind of takes you through the steps, and you can actually send them in a plant sample and your email address or whatever, and they can send the information back to you. So that's kind of fun. And additionally, if you want to, you can bring the plant into our office, and I can just try to do it on site for you. And if I can't figure it out, then I'll just send it to them and give you the information. So there's lots of different ways, or you can actually ask me to come out to your site and do a consultation, and I can walk around your property for you and figure out, you know, what you have and kind of how to deal with the situation, if that's something that's important to you. Trying to go by my notes. So on that same topic, so if you do want me to come out, we can help you develop a management plan. So we encourage people to have what we call an integrated management plan, which means I don't just push herbicides as your only management option by any means. We can go through chemical options, we can go through manual options, we can go through what we call cultural options, which are things like changing the environment. So go to a crop or go to a manicured lawn kind of thing. So we try to give you a range of options for your issues. And the purpose of that is we don't want you to be pigeonholed to one option. So I really like to encourage people not to just think that because we're an agency that does use a lot of herbicides, because that's the easiest thing to do in the right of ways, that's not the only thing we're going to encourage people to do. So in that, one of the things that I can do also, if you just like email me pictures of your plants, I'm going to share my screen again, and I may be doing this too fast for people. I don't know. I'm new at this. All right. So one tool that I have. Can you see this now, Haley? Okay. So what this is this is a resource that is in print, and it's also online. So Haley's going to share this with you online, this link. Basically what it is it's a list of all the plants. It's way more than actually exists on our county list or the state list, but you'll be able to find most of the county or state listed plants on this. And say you have, let's go back up and get something really common. Say you have spotted knapweed, because everybody knows that spotted knapweed is a problem. We can go down and we can find spotted knapweed. And each one of these pages has a bio of the plant. It kind of has like a little description of why it's maybe noxious, or where it came from, or why it's a problem. And then as you toggle through, so there's these boxes with non-chemical control options, and why they do or don't work maybe. So for example, with spotted knapweed, mowing isn't going to be a very good option because the plant actually will adapt to mowing and just grow lower and lower and bloom lower and lower to the ground, and it'll start spreading instead of you just mowing it down and getting rid of it and not letting it flower. So then it goes through the different non-chemical, and then we'll talk about biological options, and we'll talk more about biological control later. And then it goes into chemical options, and in the chemical options section, it'll actually give you the chemical, it'll give you the rate that you need to use the chemical, it'll give you the timing, whether it works best in spring or fall, and then it'll give you just information about whether it works better to use with other agents, like to mix it with other chemicals, or to use things that we call surfactants. And a surfactant, in case you guys don't know, is basically an additive that you put in a chemical, an herbicide, that takes the viscosity of the water and it makes it so that it doesn't have surface tension. So when you think about water, water makes drops, right? So when you add a surfactant to it, it can no longer make that droplet. It kind of makes moisture more wet, for lack of a better way of describing it. So it'll tell you whether it's a good idea to use a surfactant or not. So you'll see that it gives a ton of different options. And so there's that. So when we are talking about herbicides, and I'll go through biological control and other management options as well, but just to hit on herbicides for a little while. I like to tell people when I meet with them, I like to give them my herbicide 101, I call it. So basically, when you're thinking about plant physiology, a plant comes out in the spring and it puts leaves out on the ground. In that phase of a plant's life cycle, it's basically in an absorption phase. So it's absorbing light and water and minerals into its root system so that it can go into the next phase of its life cycle. It's trying to get as much energy into its root system as possible so that it can go into its reproduction phase. And its reproduction phase, I like people to think of as an output phase. So it's trying to put that flowering stalk up, it's flowering, and then it's setting seed, and then putting those seeds out into the environment to reproduce. So when you think about herbicides, herbicides need to be absorbed by live plant material. A lot of people have been calling me lately and being like, what can I put on my plants? Well, they're all dying, so they're not going to absorb anything. When they're going to absorb things is when they're in that absorption phase early in their life cycle, and they're trying to get that energy down in their root system. So that's when you want to use herbicides. When they've flowered, it doesn't really, there's no point in putting herbicides on them because they're not going to actually absorb that chemical and take it down into their roots. You're just going to kind of chemically burn the top of them, and it's going to look to you like they're dying because they're going to wilt over and look sick, but they're not actually dying the way that they would if you put that chemical on them early in their life cycle, if that makes sense. So There's a couple of them that don't really fall into that category, just like everything in life. But for the most part, that's the best case scenario. So thinking about that, some common mistakes people make is when you're using herbicides, herbicides are all really species specific. So there's not really a one size fits all chemical that you can just use and it'll take care of all of the noxious weeds. There's certain chemicals that work better on certain species because of how they reproduce or their life cycle habits or whatever. So one big mistake is people just think that they can go put Roundup on everything or 2,4-D on everything and it's just a one size fits all, and that's not really the case. So definitely make sure that if you have a target species or you have a specific problem, that you touch base with our office and we'll try to guide you in the right direction for your specific issue. Another main issue, and like I talked about with the plant life cycle, is timing. So like I said, a lot of people right now are asking me what they can use, and I don't really want people to try to put herbicides on things right now because you're putting chemicals out into the environment that aren't going to get you your long-term control that you want. And there's no reason to put chemical in the environment when you're not going to get the results you need. Another issue is improper mixing, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. So when you're thinking about herbicides, they give you specific instructions on, and again, species specific. Some take a certain amount of herbicide and some need a little bit more, or some need a little bit less. And with herbicides, it's never a good idea. More is not always better, I guess, is the best way to put it. So the more chemical you put out there, you're not killing it any better, or you're not killing it any faster. You're, again, just putting more chemical into the environment than necessary. And the last big mistake people make is their equipment that they're using, whether it's not functioning properly or they're not using it correctly. So improper equipment use is another big problem. So when we think about equipment, and here I go again, sharing my screen. Go away. When you're using any equipment, whether it be a backpack sprayer or whether you have a little tank that you put on the back of your ATV or your lawnmower or whatnot, you need to make sure that it's calibrated. And calibration is important because you need to know how much liquid is going out in order to know how much herbicide you need to use. So, and we have these resources, and Haley's gonna share this link with you as well. It's just a really super simple worksheet that goes through how you calibrate. And if we got to be in person, I would show you this in person, but basically you make a square in your yard, and that square is going to be 18.5 by 18.5. And why that number is important is 18.5 feet by 18.5 feet is 1/128th of an acre. So 128 fluid ounces is how many ounces are in a gallon. So when you have 128 fluid ounces and 1/128th of an acre, you can figure out really quickly, it's just how many ounces per gallon you need to use when you do the calibration. And again, this may not make a whole lot of sense just right off the cuff as I'm speaking it, because it's kind of a hands-on thing, But if you read through this worksheet, it would make more sense. You're going to figure out how much volume of water is coming out of that like backpack sprayer, say. And when you know how much water is coming out of that backpack sprayer in 1/128th of an acre, you can tell exactly how many fluid ounces per acre you're putting out. So you'll know exactly how much herbicide to use. And you can always call me at our office and I can help you walk you through this or give you guidance on how much, if you can tell me what volume you calibrated, I can tell you how much herbicide to put in your sprayer. So it goes through not only the backpack sprayer calibration, but then it also goes through oops, I went too far. It also goes through calibrating what I was talking about, like the little tanks that you would put on the back of a machine. That one gets a little more complicated and I don't want to try to talk you through that one, but then you go up here and once you figure out how much volume is coming out of, say, your backpack sprayer. So when Haley and I did this last fall and I was able to do it on the ground, we came up with 40 gallons per acre was what was coming out of my backpack sprayer. So then you'll see, and can you see my little cursor? So say for spotted knapweed, if you're using Milestone, spotted knapweed, generally the recommendation is to use 7 ounces per acre. So you'll see that for 40, if you're putting out 40 gallons per acre, you would use 4.3 cc's per gallon. And they generally recommend that you use like a syringe or something so that you can get this number pretty precise. And you can get those at any of the places that you buy herbicides. So like Murdoch's, CHS, or North Valley Ag are the 3 places in the valley that you can purchase these specific broadleaf specific herbicides. And I guess I didn't touch on that yet, and I should have. So Roundup, which the active ingredient in Roundup is glyphosate, that's a non-specific herbicide. So anything that herbicide touches, it's going to kill. When you're dealing with noxious weeds, we generally recommend in most cases that you use a broadleaf specific herbicide so that it doesn't kill the grass, so that you keep the other plants healthy and robust, because the more healthy and robust your like grass is, the less opportunity there is for noxious weeds to invade. So like I said, any of the outlets that you can purchase these broadleaf specific herbicides are going to have the equipment that you need as far as the syringes to try to measure, or the chemical itself will come with a little measuring tool that will help you get the correct amount. Now we'll talk about herbicide labels. And that, hey Haley, can you, I don't know how to find my PDF of the herbicide label that I had, because I couldn't get it to pull up.
Okay.
Is there a way for you to share that on your screen?
Yes. I will share the PDF in the comment box with everyone now so that you all have it. It should be uploading. And then I will open it and share my screen.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Let's give this a shot.
Awesome. Thank you. So when you are looking at, and I don't know if I can toggle this though. Maybe. There, maybe. No, it's kind of frozen. So anyways, when you're looking at a herbicide label, there's a lot of information contained in these, and they really recommend that you read through the whole thing, obviously, because it's a legal document, but there's no way that you're going to want to, or you're going to retain or even understand most of the information. So there's a few things that are really important. The active ingredient is important because obviously you want to know what you're putting down. You want it to match your goals. So you don't want to just go grab the first thing that you find on the shelf or whatever. You want to make it specific to the recommendation for your plant. So the active ingredient is super important. You should look at environmental hazards because you want to know whether you can or can't use it near water, whether you can or can't use it in a forested environment, whether you can or can't use it around grazing animals, for example. And those should all be in the environmental hazards. Directions for use, obviously everybody should read that section just for your own edification. Personal protective equipment is another really important one. So different chemicals are rated at different levels, from hazardous to caution to whatever. So they're going to require different personal protective equipment. For most of them, you're going to want to wear a long sleeve shirt. You're going to want to wear long pants, socks, non-porous shoes, and a lot of them you're going to want to wear gloves, and those gloves are available also at the outlets. You don't want to wear just like surgical gloves or something like that, because the chemicals sometimes can react with that type of material, and you don't want that scenario. So like this one says, long sleeve shirt and long pants, chemical resistant gloves, and shoes plus socks. Don't go out there in flip-flops. That's not a very safe practice. Can you scroll down farther for me?
Mm-hmm.
To the next page.
Is that where you want it?
We can talk about storage really quick. Most of these chemicals you're not going to want to store in, say, your barn or a shed where they can freeze. When these chemicals freeze, they can either separate, kind of, and they say if you shake them up, maybe they'll work, but really it's best practice just not to let them freeze, because it can damage the effectiveness of the chemical. So you're going to want someplace that can kind of stay somewhat temperature controlled. And as far as disposal goes, do not ever pour these down a drain or into a stream, obviously. That's a bad idea. They do have some household chemical disposal options at the county waste department. So you can definitely take old chemical and dispose of them that way. I would just never recommend that you pour them into the ground or down a drain. That's not a very good idea. So you'll also see over here, it says there's a highlight over grazing and haying. A lot of these chemicals are safe to use around animals. Some people don't really understand why that would be, and so here's how I kind of describe that. So an herbicide is formulated to attack a living plant. So because mammals aren't the same as a living plant, basically your animals will just ingest this and it'll go straight through their digestive tract, and they'll poop or pee it out the same way they took it in. So on a lot of these chemicals, it'll actually say you know, safe for grazing within like hours or a day. But then it'll say, don't allow an animal that's been grazing on treated pasture to go into an area with a sensitive crop. They call it a sensitive crop. What they mean by that is anything that has broadleaf plants that you don't want to die, like a garden or, you know, something like that. Because what will happen is the cow, say, for instance, that's been grazing in the pasture and then goes into your garden, if it poops or pees on that garden, the chemical is still active, so it's going to kill your garden. That's why you have to be really careful with using manures and stuff like that in your garden. You have to know that that animal hasn't been grazed on a treated pasture, because if they have, you're going to have a really hard time getting your garden to grow right. And some of the most sensitive plants are like tomatoes and peppers and stuff like that. You'll see that they'll wilt and they'll get all twisty and weird if you've used manure that's been from a cow that's been eating on a treated pasture. So that's the restrictions on grass clippings, hay, or manure use. So we'll keep going and see if I highlighted more. Another thing with herbicide use while she's scrolling is you always want to be careful about wind when you're using any kind of herbicide spraying, because you'd be surprised. I've seen videos, and they have videos online if you want to check it out yourself, just how far the droplets can move in the slightest of wind. So our best management practice that we use at the county when our guys are out there spraying is we don't spray if there's anything more than 7 miles an hour. And that's a slight breeze, really, when you get right down to it. But most of them will tell you don't use in 10 miles per hour or higher. But we just kind of err on the side of caution with that one. So you'll see under application directions, application timing, I highlighted that section that says applications of transline are rain fast within 2 hours of application. So people a lot of times are really concerned with using herbicide, whether it's going to rain in a day or not. As soon as these chemicals are dry on the plant material, they're usually basically rain fast. So again, the label is going to err on the side of caution and say, well, let's wait 2 hours before a rain event just to make sure. But for the most part, if a chemical is dry on a plant, it's not going to wash off. Mixing directions. When you're mixing herbicide in any kind of tank, you kind of want to put a little bit of water in there, like maybe a third of the tank, then add the amount of chemical that you want, and then add the rest of your water, especially for like a backpack sprayer. That the addition of the water is going to kind of circulate that herbicide into the mixture, and then you're sloshing around while you're walking is going to kind of keep it mixed up. You also don't ever want to leave a backpack or a tank with a mixture sitting in it for an extended period of time, let's say even overnight, and then expect it still to be mixed correctly. Whatever's at the bottom of that tank is going to be hotter. We say hotter, that means it's gonna have a higher dose of the chemical in it, especially when you first start and it hasn't had time to mix back up. So you want to be really careful about leaving things sit. Additionally, if you leave a tank sitting out in the sun, the UV rays can change the composition of the chemical. So all of those are not recommended. Each herbicide label is going to have its own version of this weeds controlled list. Some of them, this one's pretty benign. It's just kind of gives a list of stuff. A lot of them will give the specific chemical and the recommended mixture rate. This one doesn't get into that, but a lot of them do. So this is going to look different on most of your labels. unfortunately. But you always want to make sure that your specific target plant is listed on that list of whatever herbicide you choose to use. And if you get a recommendation for a chemical and your plant isn't listed there, it doesn't necessarily mean it won't work on the plant. What that list is a list that's been vetted by this chemical company. So they've done the research to know that their chemical works on this plant at this rate. So they've done the vetting and they know for a fact that it will be successful. It doesn't mean that it's not going to work on something else. It just means that they haven't done the research to know. And so legally they can't tell you. Yeah, so this is just a box that tells you, you know, that rate and the timing and the weed species. So even though these labels seem really daunting, you can kind of weed through, pun intended, the information and find useful tidbits. And you can also, if the label on the actual chemical is so small that it's just obnoxious to try to read it, you can always pull these up online and print them out on an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper so that they're more legible.
Okay, that looks like it's the bottom of the sheet. Do you want me to stop screen sharing, or is there anything else you want to show them?
No, that's good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. Okay, back to you.
All right. All right. So that was my chemical spiel. Now let's talk about other options. So in addition to herbicide use, you can also choose to use biocontrol. There's a few cautions that I like to give people when they want to use biocontrol. For one, biocontrol is not an complete extermination option. The reason being is because bugs, like anything else in life, aren't going to eat themselves out of their environment. So what happens when you use biocontrol is the bugs may set up a population that's sustainable and eat the plants at a certain level, and maybe the bug population goes up, and then they start to watch their environment crash. So some of the bugs die off, and then the weed population increases, and so the bugs increase. So you get this kind of ebb and flow, but you never get a complete control. So generally speaking, biocontrol is an option that I think personally is best used in situations where it's too hard to use another method, where say in the backcountry, it's just really cumbersome to try to get the equipment in there to treat it with herbicide, or it's a sensitive environment that whatever herbicide is appropriate for that noxious weed just isn't really safe to use. So you would look at a biocontrol option to just try to keep that population down as much as you can, to maybe go in and use another option, maybe send a crew of volunteers in there to pull, or, you know, maybe send a pack string in there with a bunch of people with backpacks that you can spray or something. But for somebody that just has napweed in their yard, it's not really, one, you have a lot of other management choices that probably are more feasible, and two, bugs need a pretty large population in order to sustain the population of bugs. So generally speaking, when you talk to biocontrol people, they recommend like 5 acres or more of an infestation, and the infestation has to be pretty significant. And again, biocontrol in my mind is a tool in the toolbox, but it's not going to be that complete control option that you're looking for. But there is, and I'll do a screen share here really quick. there is an online resource where you guys can go. The Montana Biocontrol or Biological Weed Control Coordination Project is out of Missoula, and they're super knowledgeable, way more knowledgeable about biocontrol than I am. They do collections. There's information on their site about how private entities can go about purchasing their own biocontrol. And there's just a lot of information about biocontrol options, which species of noxious weeds they work on, which species of noxious weeds they're not available for. And in our environment here in the Valley, there's specific bugs that work on specific plants that are sustainable here and some that just aren't. Our climate just doesn't allow for them to be sustainable here. So with biocontrol, there's a lot of variables, and I definitely encourage you to do a lot of research before you make that choice to use that option. That's that. I'll stop sharing that. So grazing is another option that people really want to look at if they're hesitant to use herbicides. Grazing can be a terrific option if the plants are appropriate for grazing, again, species specific, because there are a handful of our noxious weeds that are actually poisonous to various livestock. Most of the time, horses and cows. As we know, goats pretty much are invincible when it comes to what they eat. So a lot of people want to know if there are goat herds available to rent, and to my knowledge, there's not good options in the Valley at this time. We've had a couple of people approach us asking us if we could help them get a goat herd, like help give them information on how to get a goat herd started here for noxious weed abatement. The problem being, goats tend to be a dinner bell for a lot of our predators in this valley. So it really becomes an issue of the cost of trying to keep the goats alive in order to use them as a noxious weed abatement system. So the people have to have either dogs or a really good temporary fencing system, or be with the goats 24/7. So it hasn't really taken off here as far as a management option. However, I have interacted with a few private landowners that have had a lot of success with their own goats because they have a dog, or because the goats are monitored, or because they have a good fencing system. You know, it's just tough. It's a tough management option here just because of all of our predators, basically. And then there's always the manual options of pulling, or, you know, cultivating or disking. Some of our noxious weeds just are not appropriate to pull. Things like Canada thistle, for example. People will tell me, I've tried to pull my Canada thistle and it seems like it just comes back even worse. Well, it does, and here's why. Canada thistle grows on a shared root system. So if you cut it multiple times, like if you mow it all the time, it makes up for the vertical loss by growing horizontally, because it still wants to gain that same amount of energy. So you're really exacerbating your situation, unfortunately. So again, those text sheets that I showed you earlier that go through the non-chemical options, it'll get into that with each one of the species so that you can understand why you're not having success pulling certain weeds, or why mowing just seems to make everything worse. So that's pretty much what I had to say about all of that. Going back to the county services, so a few of the options that we have for resources that I provide or that our office provides. I told you that, you know, I can come out to people's private property. I can do what I call a walk and learn, where I just go out with the landowner and we walk around the property. I point out the different issues that they have. And then at the end, you know, you can take notes, feel free, but at the end, I usually go back to the office and I write everything into an email and give you all the resources that I have and just shoot you an email at the end of the visit. We also have a lot of, like I said, printed material, the weed guides. So we have the little weed flippers, we have other stuff, you know, all kinds of different pamphlets and information. You can definitely, like I said, bring plants in. If I'm not there, the girls up front are also really well versed in the different plants that grow around here, from noxious weeds to just pasture weeds. And we have rental sprayers also. I'll touch on that real quick. So in the spring, which is the most common time that we have for people renting our equipment, we have 100 and 200 gallon boom sprayers that we have a hydraulic lift and they just drop into the bed of a pickup truck. They have booms on the back of them, and you can spray down 5 acres in a couple of hours. So it's really, really handy. Those run $45 for a day or $60 for the weekend. And the weekend runs Friday through first thing Monday. If Monday's a holiday, then you get it an extra day. And that, I think, is about it. I think we can probably do questions now.
All right, great, Noelle. Thank you so much. We did have a few questions come in, so I'm going to try to go through those in order. If anyone else has any more questions, please feel free to go ahead and type them in the comment box, and we'll work our way through. So the first question was, can you talk again about the cell phone app for Noxious Weed ID and how to find it?
Yeah, so I can try to pull it up on my phone and see if you guys can see it. It's put out by the Shutter Lab, that Montana State University Extension. Oh, well, I'm silly. I didn't bring my work phone, and that's the one that has it on it. I guess I would suggest that people call me, and while they're at the App Store, I can walk them through it, because it's super difficult to find. It's like you have to find the specific icon in the list of plant ID apps, and once you get that app, then you have to go into it and you have to choose which lab you want. And then basically what you do is you take pictures of the weed, and I think you can submit up to 4 pictures per submission, and you put in the information like where you found the plant, whether it was in a pasture, whether it was in a riparian area or a stream bank or whatever. And then you give all that kind of information and what county you found it in and all of that. And then you submit it with your email address, and they will email you back the information, and you can ask for control options as well. But it's super hard to find. I wish I could give you a more concise answer, but it took me a while.
Good to know. All right, we had another question with regards to living near a creek and some management options that might be appropriate for living by water.
So there are a handful of herbicides that are safe to use near water. Generally speaking, those are a case-by-case scenario, and I'd probably want to do a site visit just to make sure. But you know, cutting is always an option if appropriate, or pulling, or trying to change the, you know, sometimes in those situations, putting an overstory in, so like planting shrubs to choke out and shade out the weeds will work. But again, it's such a site-by-site answer, that those are the kind of situations that I'd really want to see them in person and try to give you a specific answer that fits your situation. And one of the reasons, if you get frustrated by the fact that you call into our office and we can't just say, oh, go use this, it's because by law, we can't tell you to use something if we don't know a lot of the specifics of where you're using it, because like I said, each one of those chemical labels is a legal document. And if we tell you to use something and it does damage because of whatever reason, then we would be liable. So we're really sensitive to just giving off the cuff answers. So I apologize if people get frustrated by that, but we're just trying to cover our own backsides and do the right thing for the environment and give you the best advice possible.
Good to know. All right, another question that came in was, what do I do if my neighbor won't manage their weeds?
Okay, so if possible, if possible, I encourage people to reach out to their neighbor, because you can do it in a good neighbor way some of the time. If that's not an option, there is a complaint process through our office, because noxious weed control is a legal issue per landowner. We are the enforcement agency that deals with that. So there is a formal complaint that you can fill out on our website, and we will go out and assess the situation, your neighbor's situation, and send them an enforcement letter, which lets them know that by law, it's their obligation to deal with the situation. And it requires them to submit a management plan to our office about how they're going to take care of the situation.
Great. All right, the next question has to do with putting straw or other potentially herbicide latent products in a compost.
I'm just moving so I have more light. Okay, so again, you want to make sure that you're sourcing that material from a place that has not used chemicals that are going to damage your garden. It gets complicated, but you can find non-herbicide compost, non-herbicide straw, you know. You just have to do your research, really. I mean, there's not much. I can't give you specific sources, unfortunately, but I can do more research on that. And if you call me, I can try to guide you a little bit better.
Okay. All right, let's see. Okay, so this one is a question about potentially spraying weeds in the fall, and can you spray Canada Thistle in the fall or any other species?
So yes, the answer generically is yes. There are the two species of noxious weeds that we have in our area that respond best to treatment in the fall are Canada Thistle and spotted Napweed. Why that is because, like I was talking about earlier, the absorption phase and the output phase. So spotted Napweed and Canada Thistle will regreen in the fall. After we get a little bit of moisture, they'll put up more leaves. That hasn't really happened as much this fall because we haven't gotten much moisture, but the one main point about spraying in the fall, the most important thing is to wait until the first hard overnight frost. And what I mean by a hard overnight frost is when you have frost on your windshield, that's one thing. When the plants themselves have had cold enough conditions where they're triggered to go dormant for the winter, that's the amount of cold you need. We generally in our office kind of pick about 27 degrees overnight. What you want to think about is the ground actually freezing, like the frost on the ground versus just frost on your windshield. Because the plants themselves have to get cold enough to be triggered to take that above ground energy and draw it down into their root system, because that's when you're going to get that chemical going down into that root system and actually getting the good amount of kill.
Great tip. All right, we had a question that came in. What is the best way to clean a sprayer after use?
I like that question. So there is a process called triple rinsing. So what you want to do, say a backpack sprayer, you want to get a hose in there with just clean water. You want to hose it out. You don't need to fill the whole tank. Maybe just a quarter to a third of the tank with clean water. Then you want to spray all of that out, run that clean water through the whole spray mechanism, through the hose and the nozzle. And then you want to take a small amount, let's say probably about maybe a capful of vinegar. And no, I'm sorry, I just totally misspoke. Everybody ignore what I just said. Ammonia. So you're going to want to use like a capful of ammonia and then fill it again a quarter or a third full. So again, just like with the chemical, put a little bit of water, then put your ammonia in there and then a little bit more water. Again, slosh that around the tank and make sure it goes through that whole hose and that nozzle, and then go again with the clean water, same thing. Put that all the way through the hose and the nozzle. That way you've got all of that chemical hopefully out. That's the system that we use for our sprayers if you rent them as well. There's instructions that we give you about how to do that triple rinse.
Great. All right, next question. Will you do a site visit to Lincoln County? And if not, who should they get a hold of?
Unfortunately, I am not supported to go into other counties, but these same services should be provided by your county. So I would go to the Lincoln County Weed Control District, and I think the weed coordinator up there, his name is Mike now. Try to get a hold of somebody in that county, and they should be able to support these same services.
Great. All right, so when renting equipment from the weed district, is there a requirement that you be licensed for any particular chemicals?
Another really good question. There's really only one chemical on the local market that is called a restricted chemical, which requires having a license, a weed applicator or a herbicide applicator license, and that's Tordon. I don't recommend many people use that product anyways. So but if you have, let's say, leafy spurge is one that is a good product to use on. You're gonna have to either go through the process to get your license, which you get through Montana Department of Ag, or you hire a contractor.
Okay. All right. Next question. Is there some kind of reference sheet that's available that has the most common weeds for our area, the time they bloom and when it's best to treat them, and what herbicide is best to use on that weed? So sort of an all-inclusive sheet. Does that exist?
The short answer is no, that does not exist. That's a good idea for something for me to work on in the wintertime. But the longer answer is, depending on which section of the valley you're in, there are more common noxious weeds. So the one that's just prolific throughout the valley is spotted knapweed, but some areas have a lot more hawkweed than others, and some have a lot more hound's-tongue than others, but the short answer is no, that doesn't exist, unfortunately.
Okay. All right. Someone would like to know how they reach out with you. How do they get a hold of you, Noelle?
You can go onto the Flathead County Weed Control District website, and we have basically just a comments email address. If you type, I'd like Noelle to come out to my site and do a site visit, that even though it comes to about 3 people in my office, but it does come to me as well. So that's probably the easiest versus I'm sure Haley can share my contact information with everybody. I don't mind.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can certainly do that. Let me see if I can pull it up really quick. If everybody stands by for just a second, I will pull it up. Okay. Let's go back to chat.
Sorry, I picked a spot in my house that doesn't have very good light.
Okay, here is all of Noelle's contact information. Okay. Go back to where we were in the chat. Sorry, hang on, folks. Okay, I see that somebody very helpfully found the link for the Shutter Lab Weed ID app. So
good job.
they've provided that in the comment box. I will re-provide it. You can look for that link coming your way now. Those of you that are on a computer will probably need to figure out how to get that link to your phone so you can click on it. You might have to email it to yourself or something like that. Okay. Now I'll get back to where we were for questions.
Here I am.
There, hey. Okay, someone has asked if you could please talk about organic herbicide options.
Oof. Yeah. So a lot of the organic herbicides that you'll see recipes for online or that you can purchase in the store, the problem with them is they're not going to be broadleaf specific, period. They're going to be basically like an organic version of Roundup. So anything you spray them on, it's going to kill because they're made with, gosh, vinegar and salt and soap, usually, I think is the basic recipe. So those have to be used pretty specifically. You have to spot treat, just get what you want to try to kill. And the other thing with those is they're not systemic. So by systemic, I mean that the plant absorbs it, takes it into its root system, and it dies. Basically, all of those organic herbicides are going to just do a chemical burn on top of the plant, and you're not going to get long-term control, unfortunately. I was put in contact with somebody that I'm going to work with over the winter that has developed another possible option that is not currently licensed in Montana, but we're going to work on that as well. So that's something that's coming hopefully down the pipeline, but I need time to do more research and work with that gentleman a little bit more. And that's not an option for me right now. So that's hopefully going to be dealt with this winter. So fingers crossed.
Okay. All right. Now the next question is actually directed to us at the Flathead Conservation District. So I'll take this one. It's with regards to the solarization process that we've been using in the demonstration garden and how that's going. So for those of you who are familiar and maybe have seen stuff on our Facebook page or on our website, we did do an area of solarization this year as a noxious weed management strategy. Solarization is a process where you use clear tarp material, like that UV protected greenhouse plastic, and you mow your weeds down or your whatever vegetation, you mow it down as close as you can so it's not just sticking up, and then you lightly wet the area, put the UV material down, the clear plastic, and you seal it along the edges. And the idea is that it acts like a greenhouse except way stronger and will heat up the soil temperature high enough to cause some damage to those plants in the top like 1 to 3 inches of soil. So the trial that we did at the demonstration garden, it had mixed results. It definitely killed off some things a lot better than others. For whatever reason, our dandelions actually seemed to thrive. So definitely not a strategy to use on dandelions. The napweed has mixed results. In some areas, it seemed like it did okay. In other areas, it didn't seem to have an effect at all. What I will say is that that area in general just has a lot less vegetation matter present. So one of the reasons that we chose to use a solarization option in that area is because we're pairing it with other noxious weed management strategies. That's not the only thing that we're using. And we also just kind of wanted to see how it would go. So if you're interested in other options, we can give you a guide, like a fact sheet on how to use solarization. But keep in mind, it doesn't kill off those noxious weeds because it's really only affecting the like top layer of that vegetation. It's not going to eliminate seeds that are in your seed bed, anything like that. It's a management strategy, not an eradication strategy. So a lot of people we've seen have good success in using it in areas that they pick really selectively for a specific infestation or something like a garden bed that they are putting the plastic down in between plantings to kill off that vegetation, things like that. So it's got some beneficial uses. It's not the answer for weeds if you just want to avoid herbicide. So that's kind of my 2 cents on that. Noelle, do you have anything to add for solarization?
Just like you said, it's not going to get the soil hot enough to eliminate the seed bank. It's not, and the reason you probably didn't get a lot of success with some of the napweed and some of the dandelions is they kind of have a tuber, for lack of a better, like a taproot. And it, like she said, it's only going to get the top layer hot enough to kill stuff off. So it's not going to kill that whole taproot.
Yeah. Okay, the next question was to please post the link for the comment box on the, or not the comment box, the email on the county weed department. There it is. Okay, so I'm just pulling that up now and I will copy and paste that into our chat box. Okay, so here's that sort of generic contact us form for the weed department. Should be headed your way, everyone, in the comment box. All right, let's see what else we've got for questions. Somebody said, what if you have, quote, noxious weeds on your property, but you're using them as herbs, for example, mullein? Do you have to eradicate them by law?
Mullein, for one, is not a listed noxious weed. So if you have that, never fear. As far as actual noxious weeds, let's just use St. John's wort as an example. Because it's a listed noxious weed by the state of Montana, you cannot knowingly allow it to propagate. So if you were going to use it, you can't let it flower and go to seed. So if you needed to use the vegetative parts and could figure out a way to do that, you could do that. But by law, you can't allow it to proliferate or become your neighbor's problem.
Good call. All right, so I think that's about all the questions we have. Is there any other questions that anyone has? I'd also like to invite you, if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question directly to Noelle, you are welcome to do that also. So, and we'll just keep hanging out for another while longer. And but I am going to take this opportunity now, since we have a break in the conversation, I'm going to post that link to the survey. And if you all would please take just 2 minutes of your time once we're done here to fill out that survey. It's really useful for us for getting funding to do more webinars, as well as improving our webinars and making sure that we're getting the information you need to you during these. So that link should be in the chat box now. It's a pretty short survey, so please do it. Okay, any other questions?
Oh, and thank you everybody for joining us. I appreciate all of you for trying to get more information about noxious weeds and how to do things the right way. And I definitely am totally up for being a resource for all of you. I'd much rather you ask the question and know who to ask it to, and share my information with anybody who also is struggling with noxious weeds and how to do things the right way.
Great. And it's just a little heads up for everybody that's still with us. Go ahead and grab any of those files or any of the links that are in the chat box now, because once we end the Zoom meeting, those obviously the chat box is going to go away. But I will say that this is being recorded, and the recording of this webinar will be available on our website in about a week or so. And then we will make sure that all of the references and the resources for landowners that we've talked about, we'll get those up on our website also, so that you can find them there. And any questions that you have, if you're having trouble finding anything, you can call us at the Flathead Conservation District office, or you can call Noelle directly, grab her cell phone number and email out of the comment box that I shared a little bit ago, and give her a call. Hopefully I shared your work cell phone and not your personal one.
As long as it's 406, you're good.
Okay, I think we're good. I stole it. Yep, I stole it out of your email contact, so
Perfect.
Should be good. Okay. All right, I'm going to post that survey link for everyone one more time, just in case you missed it. Please take an opportunity to do that. Okay, Noelle, are you good hanging out for just another few minutes in case anybody has any questions? We'll just hang out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, actually, I had a question for you, Noelle. Can you talk a little bit about management plans and why and how we should make a integrated weed management plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as far as, so if you go onto our website, you can find a document for filling out a weed management plan. It's a super simple one-page kind of deal. What that is that's the plan that we require people in our enforcement process to fill out. So it's not very, it's not overly detailed. It kind of just tells me that whoever I've reached out to understands that they have an obligation to deal with things and they have a plan moving forward. If you want to do something more detailed, I would definitely set up a consultation with me so that we can do the walkthrough. You can talk about your goals and your objectives specifically for your piece of property. And we can kind of build something from there. And that email that I send you back will kind of have like, here are your different options. Here's going to be the timing. Here's going to be your resources, that kind of thing. And like I said before, I just really encourage people when I do these consultations to look at the bigger picture. I don't push herbicide use as the only option. If you do choose herbicide use, this is one thing I will say is don't get stuck on one herbicide as the only thing you use over and over and over again, because plants can be like bacteria. And they can build a resistance to certain chemicals. So you kind of want to switch things up on them so that you don't get a situation where you have a resistant strain of Napweed, for example. So it's important just to always look at all of your options and have multiple tools in your toolbox and not just get fixated on one thing as your cure-all.
Good to know. Noelle, I went ahead and shared the one-page weed management plan from the county website as a file in the chat box. So folks can look for that if they're interested. And I had another question for you that I thought of was, can you speak to those pre-mixed, ready-to-use herbicides that you can get at any hardware store, sort of the pros and cons of doing that?
So when it comes to noxious weeds, the reason that they jump into that noxious weed classification is because they are so difficult to manage. They're tenacious. They have so many ways to outsmart you and outcompete the native vegetation. So when you look at those ready to use, ready mix kind of solutions, those are generally formulated for the small property owner, the house in the suburbs, kind of like you're just going to go out and do a little spot treating in your lawn or in your flower bed. So they're really not formulated with the potency of herbicide that the stuff that I sent you to Murdoch's or CHS or North Valley Ag, those are going to be a more potent, more specific broadleaf herbicide that are going to be just more successful on the noxious weeds because they are so difficult to manage versus like a dandelion or, you know, whatever.
Great. Okay. All right. Somebody asked to please repost the link to the weed management plan application. I will attempt to do that. Okay. If that doesn't work as sending the actual file, I will send a link to where on the county website you can find the file. Okay, so also try that link. All right. Well, Noelle, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was really great to have you as sort of a guest presenter on our webinar. It's a challenge to try to keep all this stuff straight. So we love having experts that are willing to come out and chat with us and do site visits and that sort of thing. So
yeah, and thank you for your technical support.
Yep, Zoom can be a difficult platform sometimes, but it it seems to be working. I think we all would have loved to have done this workshop in person again, but it's just not to be. Maybe we'll next year.
Thankfully, because most of my interactions are small groups, I'm still supported to do my consultations. So that's not an issue.
Good, good. Glad to hear it. Okay, well, we'll give everyone just another couple of minutes and then we'll go ahead and call it.
I think we're losing them pretty quick.
Okay.
Hi, Allie.
Hi, I'm still here.
I know.
Thank you so much. I know, Noelle, you had come out, was it 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, and things have not gotten better. So I think I'm gonna, it's the Napweed. Everything is good. I've been managing everything, but the Napweed has, so I'm glad to hear that fall is an option for Napweed. But
yeah,
I'll contact you about if it's possible to come on out again.
absolutely.
You do second visits?
Only for special people.
Okay. Cool. Thank you so much, you guys. It was great.
Yeah. Tell Max hi.
I will. I will. Good night.
Good night. Thank you again for everything, getting this set up. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. We'll have to maybe see if we can get you back on the schedule for early spring, get ahead of the weeds next year.
That would be amazing.
Okay. All right. Well, we know where to find you. So.
I know I can't stay hidden, but I can stay out of the office. So.
Oh, that's better than me. Have a hard time getting out of the office these days.
Yeah.
We need to have you come over to the demonstration garden and help us set up some trials for different weed management.
Yes, that would be awesome. Hi, Sam.
Hi, thanks so much, Noelle. That was great.
You're welcome.
I'm gonna hop off, but really, I learned a lot. That was awesome. Thank you.
Cool. No problem. Have a great night.
You too. Bye, guys.
I always feel bad when I can't answer people's questions, like the stream side question. It's just like,
No, it's tough. It's hard when you gotta know all of the different variables and all the different plants in order to be able to actually make a decision.
yeah, or give solid advice because,
Mhm.
you know, you could shoot from the hip all you want, but I don't want people to do the wrong thing.
Yep. Not when you're dealing with chemicals, that's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, well, it is 7:40, so I think we'll go ahead and call it an evening. Once again, Noelle, thank you so much for doing this. Lots of great information and resources.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And thank you everybody for joining that's still here. Toughing it out.
Yeah. Okay, well, have a good night, everyone. You know where to find all of us if you have any questions that you think of later. Okay.